Hello beautiful peeps, this is Chris from TechSpert, and this absolute beast here is the Razer Blade Pro 17. It's a behemoth of a gaming laptop, but premium through and through as well. Boasts an RTX 2080 graphics, some top-end 9th generation Intel Core performance, impressive customization, and even a spot of upgradability as well. Of course, if you want absolutely minted, then you might as well look away now, because the Razer Blade Pro 17 starts at a whopping £2,400, and if you want this 4K RTX 2080 model, well, you're going to be stumping up well over 3K. So if you've asked Santa for this bad boy for Christmas, you better have been a very good girl or boy, and let's face it, even Santa's sack would probably struggle with this absolute whopper. But is the Razer Blade Pro 17 actually worthy of that sky-high price? Well, I've been testing the living bejesus at it for the past week or so, and here is my full in-depth review. And for more on the latest and greatest tech, please do plug, subscribe, and ding that notifications bell. Cheers! Now first up, yes, the Razer Blade Pro 17's got some very impressive specs and features, but the actual design itself certainly ain't anything to write home about. It's definitely more functional than it is attractive. The black aluminium chassis is rather bland both outside and in, despite the tri-headed snake action here on the lid. And as you can see there, it picks up greasy prints rather easily as well, so it starts to look rather grim after just a day or two. And that lid has already picked up a few little scratches and scuffs here and there as well, just in the past week, and I swear I haven't dropped it, banged it, anything like that, so I'm a little bit concerned about how it'll look over the course of a sort of a year or two. And while you can pick up some rather impressively slim and light gaming laptops for around the £1,000–1,500 mark these days, the Razer Blade Pro 17 is one chunky mother, and at almost 3 kilos, you'll definitely need some reasonably decent biceps in order to lug it around all day long. I mean, let's face it, this thing really isn't a laptop unless you happen to have a lap the size of Andre the Giant. Whenever I actually had it resting on my thighs, I felt the entire lower half of my body going numb, and it also gets a little bit toasty, especially once you're starting to get into some proper intensive media editing or gaming or anything like that. So I could also feel it slowly cooking my genitals, which to be fair these days is probably some kind of weird internet fetish. Still, at least you get a decent selection of ports, so you get a trio of USB 3.2 Type A connections backed by 2 Type C connections, one of those supporting Thunderbolt 3, so you can hook up an external GPU or a 4K monitor, as if the Razer Blade 17 Pro wasn't already pimped out enough. You've also got an HDMI port, an SD card reader, and a nice bit of Ethernet as well for your wired connectivity. And speaking of the internet connectivity, the Razer Blade Pro 17 is reassuringly future-proof as well. You get full Wi-Fi 6 support in there, so if you want to go wire-free, you can get a nice reliable connection all the same, as long as you've got Wi-Fi 6 modem, of course. Now boot up the Razer Blade Pro 17 and you've got a 720p camera which supports Windows Hello House just above the display to get you logged in a jiffy. And while the Razer Blade Pro 17 certainly didn't give great first impressions from the overall design, it's once you stare at that 4K display that you really start to fall in love with this thing. It's a 17.3-inch beast supporting 120Hz refresh rate, and basically movies and games and everything else looks absolutely stunning. Everything looks so smooth and slick that the very best titles almost look basically true to life. I found myself occasionally stopping mid-game to just admire a particularly stunning bit of scenery, when really I should have been blowing someone's skull into tiny bite-sized chunks. If you pump up the brightness, it maxes out at around 380 nits, which isn't one of the best results out there, but it still proves absolutely fine for gaming, watching movies, whatever you want, even in quite a bright environment, which is definitely great. And as far as the color reproduction goes, no worries there either. 100% of both the Adobe RGB gamut and the sRGB gamut are pleasantly covered off, so you can happily edit photos, videos, whatever you want on this laptop, and you know you'll be getting accurate results. As for the audio, absolutely no complaints there either. You get a pair of upwards firing stereo speakers, pretty standard for a gaming laptop. They're nice and meaty, got full Dolby Atmos support, and on top volume they really blast your face to bits. So at its massive annual Snapdragon Summit this year, Qualcomm pulled back the curtain on the new Snapdragon 865 platform. Yeah, that'll definitely do the job. And of course, if you're going to be doing a good bit of gaming, chances are you'll have slapped on a headset anyway. Now sandwiched in between those stereo speakers, you will find the QWERTY keyboard, and it does seem somewhat squashed here on the Razer Blade Pro 17, but it's basically just an optical illusion caused by the fact that the chassis is absolutely massive. It proves an absolutely fine size for typing and gaming. My major gripe is that the key travel is rather shallow, but it doesn't really prove a problem. I still find it comfortable for gaming and for touch typing too. There's enough space between each key to prevent miss hits, and I was happy to see some full-size cursor keys thrown in there as well, although of course there's a pesky function key right there in the corner, so I kept hitting that by mistake instead of the arrow keys. And of course, as you'd expect from a gaming machine, you've got a full customizable backlighting setup here on the Razer Blade Pro 17 as well. And when I say customizable, it's absolutely insane. Using Razer's Chroma Studio app, you can basically tweak the individual lighting and effects on every single key, adds in all kinds of different layers and all kinds of shenanigans. It really is very in-depth. You could spend literally hours playing around with this thing. And if you've got Philips Hue lights as well, you can get those synced with the Razer Blade Pro 17 and basically turn your den into some sort of crazy gaming disco. And the glass touchpad is absolutely fine as well. It's nice and spacious and responsive as well. Does full multi-touch gestures, so whatever you need it to do. To be honest, I ended up just using the touch controls here on the screen more often than not instead. It's just nice and quick and simple and works a charm. As far as the performance goes, as you would expect from the Razer Blade Pro 17, it absolutely canes. You've got an Intel Core i7 9750H chipset backed by a rather healthy 16 gigs of RAM. And if you ever do need to upgrade as well, then you've got a SODIMM setup, so you can boost it up to 64 gigs in total. Very meaty indeed. That basically means you can throw whatever you want at the Razer Blade Pro 17. Video editing, not a problem. Gaming, obviously, is a cinch. And multitasking is absolutely fine as well. Even in Google Chrome, if you're streaming video, busy downloading some files in the background, you can do whatever you want, and this thing will not stutter or stumble. And when it comes to the gaming, you got that GeForce RTX 2080 GPU, at least in this review model. You can bump that down to a 2070 or 2060, I believe it is as well, if you want to save a little bit of cash. You do have to keep the Razer Blade Pro 17 plugged in and boosted to the maximum performance settings if you're playing one of the latest games to really take advantage of that power though. I found that in the balanced mode, the likes of Destiny 2 really did chug along at that 4K resolution setting. It was just about playable, but it really wasn't much fun at all. But when I dove into the Razer Synapse app and shoved everything up onto maximum, the GPU and the CPU settings, I found that then Destiny 2 played absolutely perfectly, nice and smooth, even at that Ultra HD level. Of course, you can only do this performance boost if the Razer Blade Pro 17 is plugged in. You can't do it if it's running on battery power. I also saw a serious difference in the 3D Mark benchmarking scores as well when I boosted up to the maximum performance levels. Here's the scores that I got in Firestrike, Skydiver, Cloudgate and Ice Storm, both before with the balanced settings and then afterwards when I chucked it up to the performance modes. That said, I didn't really notice much of a difference at all in the Strange Brigade benchmarking scores, whether I was in the balanced or the performance mode. I got an average frames per second rate of around the sort of 80 FPS mark. Of course, one concern with any gaming laptop as far as the performance goes is the throttling. Will it be limited by the amount of heat churned out by those super powerful internal components? Thankfully, the Razer Blade Pro 17 didn't get too toasty. It does get quite warm here on the bottom, so I definitely recommend using a desk rather than your actual lap. Genital torture, etc, etc. And it does get quite hot here at the back as well, where you get those vents located as well, but you got an internal vapor cooling chamber, and the internal fans are actually reasonably quiet as well. Again, during those intensive long sessions, didn't seem to whiz up too bad. They weren't too obnoxious compared with some gaming laptops. And the general nippiness of the Razer Blade Pro 17 is helped along by the very nippy 1TB SSD as well, which has very strong read and write speeds. And you've got an M2 slot in there as well, so you can up to double the amount of storage available in the Razer Blade Pro 17 with, again, relative ease. Unfortunately, as with pretty much any gaming laptop out there, the battery life absolutely sucks balls. You can expect around 90 minutes of gaming on a full charge, around 2 hours of play around in Chrome, the likes of that, again, before that battery will just die a death. So combine that poor battery performance with the fact that it's an absolute unit, and yeah, the Razer Blade Pro 17's portability isn't one of its strongest suits. And that right there is my full Razer Blade Pro 17 review after a week of play. It is a big, ugly, bulky beast, and it's going to absolutely drain your savings account, but if you demand absolutely crazy premium performance and a gorgeous 4K display to take on the road with you, well, you can't really go wrong. So are you tempted by the Razer Blade Pro 17, or maybe you've been using it as your own notebook for a few weeks, whatever now? Definitely let us know your thoughts down in the comments below, and please do poke subscribe and ding that notifications bell for more on the latest greatest tech. Cheers everyone, love you!